People differ with regards to the children of Abraham. So we both agree that Abraham is someone we recognize as a prophet, someone who God loved. You know, he's called Khalil Allah in the Islamic terminology, means the friend of Allah. Yes, like a special friend, not just a friend, most dear friend of Allah. Is there a title for Abraham in the Jewish tradition?
One of the liturgical poems that we recite on Friday nights, it's called Abraham Ohavu, the Abraham who God loved.
Oh yes, of course he loved. Yeah. So I think the main contention between the Jews and the Muslims and even the Christians would be because many of them reject Ishmael as being the legitimate son and as being the legitimate inheritor to Abraham's legacy, and they only hold Isaac as the legitimate son and inheritor to his legacy. So why is that, even though both are the children of Abraham? In fact, Ishmael is the firstborn, right?
Yes. And both firstborns of their respective mothers, but from Abraham himself, Ishmael is the firstborn son.
Okay. And
Jewish law, however, inheritance with regards to a firstborn is to do with the firstborn of the mother, not the firstborn of the father.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, because I heard otherwise. I heard the firstborn gets the inheritance, right?
Yes.
Regardless of which mother they're born from.
No, it is to do with the mother.
Do you not trace your tribe from the father?
The tribe comes from the father, yes.
Okay, so what comes from the mother then?
So there's a few things that come from the mother. For example, membership of the Jewish people, first and foremost, comes from the mother.
Sorry, membership?
Membership of the Jewish people, i.e. being born into the covenants to begin with, that you'll be obligated in the laws, that's what we would call being part of the Jewish people, that comes from the mother. However, there's another thing which also has to do with the mother, and that's to do with, are you the firstborn son of the mother, in which case you'll get a double portion. I'm almost 100% sure that if a mother has two firstborn sons from different...
Sorry, a mother?
Let's say a father, let's say a man has two wives, and has a son from each one is considered the firstborn of a respective wife, and I believe both of them are supposed to get a double portion. Not 100% sure, but 98%.
Okay. So when you say mother, you mean the mother has to be Jewish, is that what you mean?
Oh, that's also true.
Okay, so your Jewishness comes from the mother, but your tribe comes from the father.
Yes.
Yes, that's right?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't want to actually misrepresent the Jewish understanding of the mother and father. But what I meant is, like, you know, when Abraham prayed for a child,
yes.
So God heard his prayer,
yes.
And the result of that was?
First Ishmael and then Isaac.
Exactly. So the first, Isaac was a bonus if you ask me. The first result was Ishmael. So his prayer was answered by the birth of Ishmael.
So it's interesting you say that, because I know that there will be disputes about whether or not this is a legitimate source to begin with.
What,
that's of course a different argument. About whether or not this has been tampered with or not, that's a different argument. But assuming that this has not been tampered with and that this is fine, which is what of course I would affirm, we can see that prior to Ishmael's birth, God promises Abraham a son. And Abraham then goes and marries Hagar, with Sarah is the one who says he should do that, and they have Ishmael. Now, at that point, the text does not tell us that this is the son that God has promised. In fact, just after that, God says the son's coming, which tells us that he hadn't yet been born. So the son that was actually promised was not the son of Hagar, the slave woman from Egypt. It was rather going to be from Sarah herself.
No. When you say the son was promised, so that conversation was taking place with Sarah, not with Abraham.
No. With Abraham.
With Abraham.
There's two different conversations. So if we go first...
because the first prayer that Abraham prayed to God was to grant him a son, isn't it? There was such a prayer, and that had been fulfilled. that prayer had been fulfilled in Ishmael being born as the first child of Abraham. And by the way, Hagar was his wife, isn't it? Do you agree with that?
And then later on, she became a wife.
Exactly, but that's what the Bible says, or at least the Tanakh says, and also the Torah that's in English today. So,
of course, it's interesting because in Genesis chapter 26, I believe, when Abraham, just before he dies, I think it's 26, I might be wrong.
sorry, who dies?
Just before Abraham dies,
Yeah.
is it 26, 25? It says that to the sons of the concubines, no, it's chapter 25, verse 5. Abraham willed all that he owns to Isaac, and in verse 6 it says, but to Abraham's sons by concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living, and he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the land of the east. So that would imply that you've got Isaac and you've got the sons of the concubines. Now,
Can I ask a question at this point?
sure.
The rights of the firstborn,
Yes.
Yeah.
is that to do with the father or the mother?
So I believe, this is what I was saying before, that's to do with the mother. That the
rights of the firstborn.
the firstborn of the mother is the one that gets a double portion. If there's more than one firstborn of the mother, then both of them will get a double portion. Now that's, of course, according to the laws of Yerusha, the laws of inheritance that are part of the Sinaitic covenant. Whether or not that already applies against Abraham is something that could
I think
be
you're wrong.
debated.
I think you're wrong. Because the rights of the firstborn, it says, whether it be from the wife you love it,
Yeah.
or it doesn't matter. So when it talks about the rights of the firstborn, it's referring to the different types of wives.
That's a very good point there.
So the rights of the firstborn is not necessarily which woman had the baby first, it's who the fathered first.
That's what I told you earlier, isn't it?
Possibility.
Well, no, that's
Because the right of the firstborn.
When it's from the wife you love it or the wife you hate, it
Right,
doesn't
let's
matter.
go to that. One second. You might be right. We're going to go to that.
It's not the first time I've had this conversation, so I think I am
We'll go
right.
to that. Deuteronomy chapter 24.
Yeah.
No, it's not 24. It's 25. No, it's going to be 23, isn't it? Right. If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons, but the firstborn is... you're right, well done.
Okay.
All right,
So we settled that
I don't
matter.
think this is going to be the first time.
Yeah.
The said he must accept the firstborn, the son, and allot him to a double portion. Okay?
So far now, who's the firstborn? Ishmael or Ishmael?
Okay.
So the firstborn of Abraham, per this, would indeed be Ishmael.
Okay. Now,
However, there is still the issue of the fact that Hagar was the maidservant.
yeah, but she
say-
was given as a wife.
But if we say at the beginning that she is a concubine, then the law is going to
Well,
be
here's the
different.
problem you've got now.
Yes.
The 12 tribes of Israel came from Jacob and his two wives and their concubines. And
Yes.
concubines.
And who's the firstborn?
No, so are you saying that the 12 tribes of Israel are not equal?
Of course they're not equal.
They're not equal.
No, there's always been a little bit of a lesser status to the four that were the sons of the concubines, which is why, by the way, it says that Joseph used
So
to...
where does it say that? Sorry, that the rights of the firstborn if your wife is a concubine?
So that's not explicit in the... that's not
So where you
explicit in
getting
the
that
Levitical
from
law.
then?
This is
Where
in
you
the Oral Torah.
Where are you getting that?
Okay, so it's not from the Tanakh.
So it's not from the
It's
Tanakh.
not explicit in the Tanakh. No.
Okay.
Right, so it doesn't say that in your book.
No, it doesn't say it here.
You just kind of got it from where?
It's from the Oral Torah. Right?
So what does the oral Torah actually say?
So in the Old Torah, there's a tractate called Bava Basra, where there's a very long chapter called Yeshma'ael, all about the laws of inheritance.
Okay.
And I believe that somewhere in there is a distinction made between a wife and a concubine. I do not have a Bava Basra with me.
Okay, because you had been wrong earlier, so
was wrong
I
earlier.
thought I will confirm with you if you have the source.
So I don't have the
If you don't
source.
have the source, that's fine. Okay, let's talk about the covenant, because this is, I think, the most crucial question, and the Christians often use this, that the covenant was established with Isaac, not with Ishmael. What do you make of that?
Well, in Genesis, that's what we find. The covenant was made with Isaac.
Okay, what was the first covenant established with Abraham?
The first covenant established with Abraham, depends what you consider a covenant, but I would say probably the covenant between the parts.
Between the?
Between the parts.
What parts?
Sorry, but Genesis chapter 15. what happens is...
Covenant between the parts.
Yeah,
What parts?
What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. I never heard that before.
That's what we call it, the bris ben habasorim, the covenant between the parts. Where basically God tells to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old she-goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young bird. He brought to him all these and cut them in two, placing each half opposite the other, but he did not cut up the bird. Birds of prey came down upon the carcasses, and Abram drove them away. Right, so this is what we call the covenant between the parts.
Where does it say it's a covenant in there?
Does it say the word covenant in here? Let me have a look.
I didn't hear it.
Does not say the word covenant.
If you remember, the first covenant was actually circumcision.
Right, that's the first one that says the word
Okay?
covenant. That's true.
So the first covenant, which is circumcision, Abraham was to circumcise himself and everyone in his household. So let me read the passage in Genesis, chapter 17, verse 13 to 14. It says, whether born in your household or bought with your money, they must be circumcised. My covenant in your flesh is to be an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Now this was the first covenant that God established with Abraham and his household.
That's the first time the word covenant is
Since
So this just matches up your claim about the idea that if the wife is a concubine or not. He said if he's a slave.
No, that's to do with circumcision, not to do with inheritance.
That's to do with the covenant.
Circumcision is not the same as inheritance.
The covenant.
no, it's to do with the question was about the covenant.
Yes.
And not only a covenant, this is an everlasting covenant,
Yes.
by the way, which Paul broke. So we'll come to that later. You probably don't believe in Paul, but if there was a Christian here, I'll bring that up. Okay, because Paul actually said is a circumcision of the heart, which no one was supposed to do away with, because God told Abraham this was an everlasting covenant, not a temporary one. Okay, so anyway, put that aside for now.
But I think I just have one little thing. So
Yeah, sure, go on. Yeah.
See, when it says everlasting covenant, it doesn't mean it's going to last unconditionally. There's conditions to the covenant.
Only God can undo it.
Yeah, no, God gives a covenant, there's conditions to the covenant.
Yeah.
So clearly, like for example, circumcision is one of the conditions of the covenant.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? Circumcision is something we have to do.
So the point here is
that there's something else.
Yeah, so I'm just making the point that even though the covenant was given as an everlasting thing, it was conditional. That's all I would say. But once the conditions are broken, then of course you've broken the covenant.
So
You break the covenant, it doesn't mean the covenant has ceased to exist.
No, it means
no, we are not saying that. Unless God, obviously, unless God.
Unless God.
Yeah. Like if it's something which is abrogated by God, then that's different. What do you mean now? Can God not abrogate if he wants to?
Can God create a square circle? We're not talking about what God can and can't.
No, God never said that he's going to create a square circle. Exactly.
Because the idea that God would change in some way, would abrogate, is something which contradicts the very idea of God.
If God himself abrogates it, if God himself abrogates a law,
What's the problem with God changing it?
Because if God has said something is everlasting, and then he goes back on it.
oh yeah, that I agree. But if God did not say a law is everlasting, and if he abrogates that, then what's the issue there?
Would you say rejecting Jesus was kind of breaking the covenant?
No, because Jesus is not a part of the covenant to start with.
No, the prophets of God.
Jesus is not a prophet.
No. But if Jesus was a prophet, have you broke the covenant?
If he was a prophet,
then you broke the covenant.
Then that would be another sin. Yes.
Would you have broke the covenant?
That would be another sin within the covenant if he was in fact.
So effectively, you could say Jews that reject Jesus, if he is indeed a prophet, are out of the covenant. Then, yeah. All right, carry on.
No, not out of the covenant.
They've broken it.
No. Okay. Do you know what it means to break the covenant?
That's this question I'm asking.
Yeah. So I'll explain to you what it means to break the covenant. If let's say I say gossip about a person, right? So that's a sin, right? So if I commit a sin, so that is something which has broken the covenant. But it doesn't mean that I'm suddenly exempt from the covenant.
So what?
Right? It doesn't mean that I do one sin and then suddenly I'm allowed to do everything else.
So what does exempt you?
Nothing exempts me from the covenant.
Well, what's the conditions of the covenant?
that I do the laws.
You keep the laws.
If I keep the law, then I will receive blessing.
how do you keep the law?
If I don't keep the law, then I won't receive blessing.
But if new prophets come with new law and you don't keep that law, are you still within the covenant? Are you still keeping the
As in
law?
prophets coming with a law that contradict the previous, or simply just new laws?
Complement it.
Like you give some sort of, because I'm not really sure what English you're saying.
I'm saying if a prophet came after,
Yes. Let's call this prophet Mark, for example.
Let's
Or
call-
Charlie. Let's call him Charlie.
no, let's call this prophet Muhammad.
All right, fine. So a prophet
And
a
he
guy
comes with
comes
some
along,
new law. He comes with new
Muhammad,
law. He comes with new law.
And what kind of a law he
Whatever the
he
law
says?
is.
It just,
Let's say
You've
dietary
chosen
law.
a name.
Let's say dietary law.
Right, so dietary law, you're not allowed to eat.
Well, no, we want something that's
Let's say-
extra. We want something extra.
You're not allowed
They've
to
already got
eat-
the dietary law.
You're not allowed to eat cows anymore, right?
No, but for them, for example, camel is not allowed to permit it.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
A prophet comes along and says you have to pray 5 times a day.
Okay, right, you have to pray 5 times a day. So that will depend now. Is the prophet saying that this has been the law all along?
Oh, hello there.
Or is he saying
No, this is something new.
Is the prophet saying whole new law now? Instead of
Yeah.
3 times, they're now doing 5 times.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that will depend whether or not the prophet is changing anything that came before. If he was, then he'd be a false prophet. If he's a true prophet, then we'd have to do so.
Okay, so if a prophet comes and say this is the last message from God,
Yeah.
yes, and I'm the last messenger,
Right.
then what do you say?
If he's a true prophet, then sure.
Okay.
If he's a true
Now, if you
prophet,
reject that prophet, have you broken the covenant?
once again, we would have committed another sin within the
No. Is he rejecting a prophet of God breaking the covenant or not?
Yes, just like every other sin.
No.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So for him, a covenant is basically just disobedience of God.
No.
In a way.
No.
From what you told me so far.
Covenant with God means that God promised us blessings, and
conditions
we,
to it.
and we, in order to receive those blessings, have to keep the laws.
There's conditions to
and
it.
if we don't keep the laws, then we have committed a sin against God, and we won't receive blessings.
Right.
So if I say gossip about somebody, or if I steal from somebody,
No,
or
we're
if I
saying
eat
that.
camel
No, we
meat,
didn't say that, did we? Well, the point we made is that if a prophet comes, a true prophet of God,
Yeah.
with laws,
yeah, and you don't believe
and
him,
you don't accept them,
Okay.
are you out of the covenant then?
out of you're not exempt from the covenant.
Why not? You're not keeping the law.
Because if you commit a sin, it doesn't exempt
You're not
you
keeping
from
the law.
keeping the rest of them.
No, but you're not actually keeping the law.
Actually, for them, the law doesn't change.
The law doesn't
That's what. There's a difference between the Muslims. We believe that God can abrogate the laws depending on the what do you say, the Sharia of the Prophet or the Messenger. But for them, you cannot abrogate the law because God is unchanging. But then I think we have sidetracked, so let's get back
go on.
on track with regards to covenant.
Thank you,
Okay.
Hisham. That's exactly what I was trying to say.
No, that's fine.
No.
Because
I'm trying to help the viewers understand
Yeah.
what do we actually mean by covenant,
Yeah.
and how would you? Because it's conditional.
So for those people,
Carte blanche, conditional.
for those people who say that the covenant was not established with Ishmael but with Isaac, I say actually the covenant was first established with Ishmael because he was the firstborn. He was first to be circumcised. I think, if I remember correctly from the Bible source, Ishmael was something like 14 years old when Isaac was born. Is that right? Thereabouts.
Very likely. Very
Yeah,
likely.
so he was already 14 years old in his teens, yes, and he was already circumcised. That means the covenant was actually first established with Abraham, then his firstborn Ishmael, and then Isaac later on. So anyone who says the covenant is not established with Ishmael is completely and utterly wrong.
Yes, you're right about 14. Yes, because it says he was circumcised at 13,
Yeah.
and of course a year later is when
Isaac was born. Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Do you believe that narrative is historical?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
So how did am I sidetracking?
No, you're okay. I wanted to make this point about the covenant, and because they deny the covenant being established
no, 'cause
with
you-
Ishmael, we have already sorted that. That was the main.
Yeah, okay, because he's quoting this as kind of history. Because if you read the narrative, it's acting like Ishmael's a baby.
Oh, you're going to that?
Oh,
Okay,
you're
about the
going that one.
sacrifice?
We did that
Yeah.
last time.
No.
No?
Yeah. We did that last time. Do you remember?
Okay, let's rephrase what you just said. Yeah, we established I was right last time on
No,
this
we
point.
didn't establish you were right last time.
Was he a baby or was he an adult?
I gave gave an explanation which you didn't
What was your
accept.
okay? So what was your explanation how Abraham put the baby on his mother?
Doesn't say baby.
Okay, the child. That's the child.
The child.
Says the lad, the child.
Puts it on his mother.
Yes.
How old was that? How old was he?
He was, at the time, in his 20s or 30s or something. Maybe older.
What?
20s or 30s?
Yes.
I was going to say like 16, 17.
Yeah, I was talking teenager.
I'm talking,
Yeah.
You're saying 20s or 30s?
Something like that.
So Abraham put his 20,
Yes.
30-year-old son on his
You know
mother.
why?
On the shoulder.
On the shoulder.
The Jewish explanation of this is that he was very sick at the time. Ishmael was very sick.
So his mother carried him.
Yes.
And why was he very sick? According to what?
Does it say that he was
He
sick?
was sick.
This is once again the old tradition.
Right, so this whole tradition, this is getting dodgy, this. Alright, so
Can I ask a question? How old was his mother?
That doesn't say. We're never told about her age.
well, she must be at least what?
Well, if Abraham was
30, if he's 30.
if Abraham was 99 years old when he had Ishmael, can you imagine how old Sarah or Hagar will be?
So,
Hagar will be.
so
Okay.
Hagar were never told her age anyway.
Okay. I don't think they talk about her age. Okay.
I would presume significantly older than
Ishmael.
Yeah, she would have been significantly older than
and she was carrying a grown man,
30-year-old.
30-year-old.
Now, first of all, so let's pretend for a second that it would be unreasonable to say that she is carrying him, which I don't think it's that unreasonable to say. But even if
It's a baby. The narrative is a baby.
it doesn't say baby.
It doesn't have to. The narrative says it.
No, the narrative does not say baby.
The narrative says, put her on the shoulder, the baby cried, put her under the bush, hold the baby up. What are you talking about? Hold the lad up.
Does a 20-year-old, even if he's sick, does he cry?
Does he cry under a bush?
Well, this one, yes.
And she puts him under a bush.
I mean, cry like a baby.
Cries like a
Obviously,
baby.
Yeah.
20-year-old. And then when she's told to hold him up, 20-year-old.
Well, to be fair,
Josh, it's just utter nonsense, mate. It's utter nonsense. The narrative does not make any
Are
sense.
you saying it's waffling?
It's waffling.
I'm not waffling. I would advise.
No, I would say he's waffling. No,
I would advise.
the text is clear.
I would.
Josh, 1 second.
You'd have to accept that a non-Jew,
Yes.
without any bias,
Yes.
would probably find that.
One second. What's the verse?
Yes.
Let me read the
I
verse.
accept that somebody who
Genesis 16?
Anybody here not a Jew?
doesn't know what they're.
All right, let me just read this.
Anyone who know? I think all of them.
All of them, yeah.
Except him and his pal.
No, but I think to be fair, you can't be Muslim either. Not a Jew or a Muslim.
Anyone not a Muslim?
Any atheists or Christians in the house?
Even Christians, was they're going to be biased. All right, anyway, camera's watching. What's the verse?
I think Genesis 16.
Genesis 16. What's the kindest?
Oh, is it about the sacrifice? Which one is it?
No, this is talking about
No,
when he
not
got sent
Genesis
out.
16.
Oh, so it's not 16 then.
That's
it's-
Genesis 20.
All right, so what Genesis is
I
it?
believe.
Genesis 20.
Oh no, it's not. Is it 21? Yes, 21.
21.
Josh, does it explicitly say the age of?
Yeah, Genesis 21, 17.
But it's
God heard the boy crying.
One second.
What is the reason that it's?
Okay, one second.
21, 17.
So this is no, you're saying this is talking about 20, 30-year-old guy, yeah? All right. Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat about a bow shot away. I cannot watch the boy die. As she sat there, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation."
Yes.
This is talking about 30-year-olds.
God heard the boy crying. So you call a 30-year-old a boy?
This particular one, yes.
Why?
Why this particular one?
Because you're sick, you call him a boy?
If you go a little bit further back in the chapter, if you go back to chapter, in the same chapter, go back to verse.
Yeah, he is a boy. We know he's a boy. You say
Go
he's
a
a
little bit
man.
back. Go a little bit back. You'll see verse 9, right? Sarah was the son. So Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had born to Abraham playing. She said to Abraham, "Cast out that slave woman and her son, for the son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance of his son Isaac." So if you want to take all of this literally, then you're going to see that over there he's playing, right? So we would say that he's a very immature individual indeed.
A very mature 30-year-old.
It's all literally, right? In actual.
Let him finish.
The time timeline is simple.
He doesn't let
No, but here's the
people finish.
problem.
I had this with him last time.
Let Josh finish.
Just 1 second. But Josh is waffling. I'll tell you why you're waffling, Josh. I'll tell you why you're waffling, Josh. I'll tell you why you're waffling. He did finish.
No, what I'm saying, Josh, with that, what you just said, is that he was playing.
Yeah.
A 6-month-old child can be playing, a 1-year-old child can be playing.
Yeah.
No, 1 second.
It doesn't make them a 30-year-old man, does it?
Okay.
I wasn't proving to them what his age was.
Okay.
That will come if he allows me.
Let him make his point.
The entire way that we know how old he was at all is based on oral law. So even our conjecture that he was much older and our conjecture of the type of person he was is all from oral law.
How do you know that oral law is
How
accurate?
do you know?
How do you know that oral law is
That's a whole other argument.
Yeah,
That's
because
a whole
you
other
couldn't write it down, could you?
But the way the oral law it shows us that Ishmael was much older is because this story is made after Isaac's been born, and it's given to us just before the story of the Akedah, which is the binding of Isaac on Moriah, which of course you will dispute. So at that point, of course, Isaac was 37. We say that it's sometime in between his birth and the Akedah.
Let me at least demolish your 30-year-old argument, if you don't mind. Even your 20-year-old argument. Yeah. How old was Abraham when Ishmael was born?
Ishmael was born
86.
faster than I am.
86?
Yeah.
How old was he when Isaac was born?
19.
Plus 14.
100. So how old is Ishmael? 14.
14, yes.
Right. And when was he kicked out? After the baby finished weaning? How long did you wean the baby for?
3.
3 years?
Yes.
But by your calculations, it's 13 years. 30. He says 13.
I didn't give a specific...
That makes Ishmael at least 17 years old.
30s.
At least 17 years.
I said 20s.
After the weaning of
Okay,
Isaac.
so you said 20s or 30s, right? This is demonstrating your oral tradition is wrong.
No, it's not.
Well, it is. Well, how long did Isaac wean for?
3
years.
3 years.
3 years. So what's the oldest Isaac could possibly be? Ishmael could possibly be the oldest.
If we say that it's straight after the weaning, then you will
Well, not
say...
straight after the weaning.
If you say that it's straight after the weaning, which is the way you're reading the text...
Oh, I'm sorry, it's not after the weaning.
Does it say straight after?
Well, let's say 17. Sorry, 14 plus 3.
But if he does emphasise weaning and
Okay, the child grew and was weaned.
It does say- it
and
does
on
say
the day
weaning.
Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw the day he was weaned, which means the day he come off, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had born to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman. So he's maximum 17. So if your oral tradition is making the claim he's 20 or 30, it's wrong.
Yeah, based on the Tanakh.
Based on the Tanakh.
By the way, which one do
What's
you
more authoritative?
which one do
Oral
you
tradition or the
give
Tanakh?
precedence to?
Together.
No, which is more authoritative? We've got a contradiction. Which is more authoritative?
There's no such thing as more authoritative between a text. Let me finish. I know you like interrupting me, but it's not going to happen this time. When you have a written text which is supposed to be explained and read in accordance with the explanations given by the oral text, there's no question of which one is more authoritative. It's you have a text which is unclear and a text which explains the unclear text.
Okay.
It's not actually a text which explains, it's an oral. It's an oral teaching which explains
So
the
what
written
if the oral
text.
tradition is contradicting the written text?
The oral tradition does not contradict, it explains, it clarifies.
Well, it's wrong.
No, but if there is a contradiction, what do you do?
It's not a contradiction.
If there is a
It's
contradiction,
not.
Josh, if there is a contradiction, what do you do? What is your protocol in this? In that,
If there's a contradiction between oral...
between the Tanakh and the
Oral tradition.
What is the name for the oral tradition?
We call it Torah Shabbat Al Peh.
Okay,
Oral tradition.
I just call it oral tradition.
So if there's a contradiction between them,
Yes.
which is more authoritative?
The whole question is flawed from the basic premise that there would be a contradiction.
Oh, okay. The Tanakh.
It's,
Is it 6 o'clock yet?
I don't know my watch. Oh, it's it's 5:39.
Yeah, the Tanakh
I've got
says,
all that 6.
the Tanakh
Okay.
indicates that Ishmael
Yes.
was 17.
The implication that you're deriving from it is that he was 17, yes.
No. That's what it says.
No, it does not say...
How long was he weaned for?
Okay, let me read it to you.
3 years.
3 years is given
It
it.
says... Go back.
Why was Sarah jealous of Hagar, by the way?
It says, the child grew up and was weaned, and Abraham held a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned.
What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean?
So that's at 3 years old. That's at 3. Next
He's
verse.
3.
Yeah,
How old
that's
is Ishmael
3.
at this time?
At that time, he's 17.
Right.
Next verse. Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had born to Abraham playing. That's a different subject now. It does not say that that happened on the same day. Your translation there, you've added the word but. Right? It doesn't have that in mind. You have the word but.
One word?
In your the word but.
Who said but?
In your translation, the one you read before, it
Why does
says
it say but?
as a as a connective at the beginning of verse 9.
Oh yeah, but Sarah saw the... Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying that's wrong?
That's added. You don't need the but there.
No, well, if you don't have the but there, Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian
That's
had
a
born
new verse, and it doesn't say that's
Well, it
happening.
doesn't- it
on the
doesn't say
same-
playing either.
Right, the implication that you were trying to the implication that you were making was, but this happened, so that connects it more
No.
with the previous verse.
It doesn't
You
say
don't
the word
have to
playing.
say that.
It doesn't say she saw him playing. It doesn't
The
say...
Hebrew word is mitzachik.
It says
which
mocking.
means the Hebrew word mitzachik has various meanings. It can mean playing, it can mean mocking. And based, by the way, on that, on the various meanings of the word and the unusual usage of this word here, the oral tradition derives various possibilities as to what exactly Ishmael was doing here.
This oral tradition's got a lot to answer
Yeah.
for.
By the way, what are we trying to determine from here?
What we're trying to determine from here is the age of Ishmael when he was kicked out, 17, and the narrative indicates it's like a baby, and at the same time demonstrating the oral tradition's wrong, claiming he's 20 or 30. We're doing two jobs here. We're mashing up the oral tradition at that point, and at the same time, we're calling into account the historical idea that the way that the narrative is talking is like a baby or a small child, and he's supposed to be 20 or 30. It doesn't make no sense.
And it's put on mother's shoulder.
And it's on his mother's shoulder.
No.
And,
First of
and
all-
he's put under a
and-
bush.
and he's crying.
And he's crying.
What exactly was
And the mother's told to lift him up.
What was put on the mother's shoulder? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, what was
If
put?
we look